risk management and zero trust. How do they align or support one another, or do they? Well, that is the topic of discussion today in this episode of the Zero Trust series. So let's identify some definitions here. Remember that a risk management program really is a systematic approach to identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and mitigating risk across all activities, users, and devices. That's really the core of what a risk management program is. Now, this also includes, but is not limited to, identifying potential risks and vulnerabilities, evaluating the likelihood and the potential impact of these risks, and developing a strategy to either mitigate the risk or avoid them altogether. And my preference is to always avoid the risk whenever possible. And in order to be proactive, now the reality is that we can never avoid all risk. Risk is risk, right? There are a lot of unknowns related to risk, but we want to try to mitigate risk, and we want to, the old phrase that you used to hear, learn from our mistakes. So let's learn from our mistakes through a risk management program. And one of the best risk management programs, and I know for those of you that have listened to other videos, I'm a DoD, U.S. Department of Defense guy, so I get it, right? But the risk management framework, or what is called RMF, provides a structured process for managing risk to its information systems and networks. And RMF is used heavily within the United States Department of Defense and most federal and state agencies within the United States. Now, why? Because RMF is built on the National Institute of Standards and Technology, what is called NIST, N-I-S-T, risk management framework. And this includes RMF includes a lot of controls. So depending upon your level of authorization, what type of security you want for your environment, which we're going to speak about here in just a moment, there'll be different levels of controls that you'll need to implement. But essentially, the RMF program is a six-step process for managing risk, assessing the effectiveness of the controls that you've put in place. It includes categorizing information and information systems, selecting and implementing those controls. Again, assessing the effectiveness of those controls, authorizing systems to operate, what the federal government calls an ATO, monitor the system, which is often referred to as continuous monitoring, and of course, be flexible and modify and continually improve the environment to minimize your risk. So the RMF framework is really very well established, and you can implement solutions from anywhere from 50 to 80 controls to hundreds of controls that will manage your environment. Now, each control is grouped in a family. For example, access control, called AC, is one of the many families found within RMF. Now, the NIST 800-53, that document basically covers all of the controls. And if you look at other groupings like RMF, for example, or CMMC, which we spoke of in another video, those groupings are just a redefinition or grouping of controls that already exist within 800-53, or they've added some additional controls. or not added controls. But they're all kind of founded in the same set of controls that NIST provides. And there are multiple categories. I don't have them off the top of my head, but there are multiple categories that address risk at all different levels. So if you're a very small business, for example, you may implement a handful of controls. In fact, in Office 365, if you're using that environment and you're a small business, the controls that you implement there, many of them are very similar to the NIST controls. They don't identify them that way, but they're very similar when you go to security and compliance within your Office 365 environment. So the concept of implementing controls should not be foreign, and it is a critical component of a zero trust architecture. So risk management and zero trust, they share very similar attributes, and the risk management component, if we're really talking about that assessment of risk and vulnerabilities, is a critical piece of the zero trust architecture. Now, it's important that when you implement a zero trust environment, and certainly when you implement a risk management framework, that it becomes a integrated part of all decisions related to onboarding and new technology as it's implemented. It impacts either your local organization, which may be small or could be a huge enterprise, but there really needs to be that governance piece in there to keep everyone accountable to the security framework that you've implemented. So for example, if a certain application does not meet the standards of the controls, then the application should not be used within the environment. The days have long passed, and there are multiple alternatives available, primarily driven by the Department of Defense and the U.S. government's requirements to have these security measures implemented within applications. But as a result, you can find a lot of applications to support whatever your business objectives are, but securely. So you don't have to now settle, well, this guy is a whiz-bang programmer and he's really developing something great for me. And that is wonderful as long as it is in compliance with the security controls you've implemented in your environment. And to monitor and govern this, you really need to have something like an ITIL process within your environment. Some sort of change and implementation management where you can monitor and make sure that the cyber folks are signing off on new technologies before they enter into your environment. So remember, risk management programs are designed to ensure that risks are managed and identified effectively. Okay? That the organization can continue to meet its objectives in a safe and secure manner is ultimately the objective of both risk management and zero trust architecture.